Darren, tell us how you started to think about the way people think.
I was using something called the identity compass, and what it does is it deconstructs it's a profile system, and it deconstructs your thinking into 50 shortcuts, right? And I got a job in a university in London where I created something called the High Flyers program, and we took 12, 16 students, profiled them, and showed them how their thinking is potentially limited and how then to develop their thinking. So it was an extracurricular activity, right? What I noticed was I was also reading at the time people like Otto Lasky and Robert Keegan on levels of adult development.
Yeah.
And I noticed that somebody who was very external, caring for others, had a level 3 frame of mind, right, which is called socialized mind.
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed that somebody who was massively internal had a different way of being in the world to somebody who was massively external. And I mapped the combination of these cognitive tensions to the different levels of thinking.
And the average person that comes to find out more about something like this, I say average person, but the usual person that's attracted to finding something out about this and learning more about themselves, who are they? What are they doing? What's showing up in their life or their work that would make them want to improve their thinking?
Typically, it's someone moving away from level 3, Keegan's system, which is socialized mind, towards a more level 4 response, which is a self-authored perspective.
Okay.
They don't call it this, they don't know what it's called, it's just how they are.
Yeah.
For example, at level 2, they're not going to come to me, because they're already brilliant. They're already great, right?
But is it because they are or because they think they are?
Because they think they are. right. So, I'm not going to change, I'm already number 1.
Okay.
So, but the person that's at level 3 thinking, hang on a second, I don't actually agree with this socialized perspective. I don't agree with my family. I don't agree with my organization. I'm not keen on rules. And they don't know why this is the case. It's because they're going more towards their own locus of evaluation. Yeah.
Interesting. So what is that doing for somebody who is that level 2, who's going about their day not even realizing that there's this other level of themselves that they could go to? What would you say to those people?
I'd offer them a more external perspective. So the way I did it, internal, external, for example. Internal is you get your rules from you. External is you get your rules from somewhere else. It could be the organisation, a judge, or your family, right?
Yeah.
They have an internal locus of evaluation, but what they do is they don't listen to other people's perspectives. So just to get them to consider the potential, you offer them and ask them to think about how does that impact others? How, if you put yourself in other people's shoes, what does that look like?
Yeah.
But they have to do it, depending on how old they are. If you're my age, it's probably 3 months. If you're youngsters, it's a month. How does that impact your thinking? And it's not the fact that they're massively internal. I then get them to be massively external so that the pendulum comes back to the middle. And eventually they can Now, if you think about this, people who are really, really external eventually need therapy. So when you impact their internal perspective, you don't just change internal external, you change their world view.
Completely.
It's a complete personality change. I don't like personality.
And for those that are the level 3, and I'm assuming that there might be a level 4, 5, 6.
There's 4 and 5 in Keegan's system, yes.
Okay. And you have a level 6.
In the Stevens system, which is mine, I've got the awareness quotient, right? And that goes from level 5 to 10. No one is 9. I haven't even met a 9 yet.
Right.
It's my system and I'm not 9.
Okay.
Right? The highest I've got is about 8.4. But the idea there is that 10, we hear a lot about things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and people don't realise that he just made it up. He never met anybody who was self-actualised. It's just nonsense. With my one, I'm explicit and say level 10 doesn't exist.
Right.
It's a description, it's not real. Right? But in Keegan's system, at level 5, you've got your people like Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, they want to change the world and leave a legacy. Or in Musk's case, he wants to go to another world.
Right.
Whatever your political views about him and however you think about him, his thinking is beyond.
Right.
Yeah, and you'll never meet those people in real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But level 4 people, self-authored people, 20% of the population, you'll meet them.
Okay.
But when they transition from 3 to 4, the traditional, and this is what was important for me, the traditional systems say that moving from 3 to 4 is painful. But it's not. People like Garvey Berger talk about this, but Why would it be painful when you know where you're going?
Absolutely.
So I offer them that route, but I offer them the understanding of how and why they're going there on my workshops.
Yeah. So just talk me through what are some of the things you would do on your workshops? Are they like one day? Can you take somebody from a level of thinking to either the next level or 2 or 3 levels of thinking even in one day?
Yes, I could disrupt your thinking now. For 10 minutes, you'll be at the next level. Doesn't mean you'll stay there, but it does mean you'll live there for a little while. Right. But I've got a number of workshops. But if you wanted to do one from a C-suite perspective, what we do is we take one scenario that's bespoke to the company. I write that with help of the person in the organisation. I write that problem at level 2.
Yeah.
Then again at level 3. Then again at level 4, and maybe level 5. And over the course of 4 or 5 days, we work on the problem. By the time we get to the second day and they realise that this is a different way of thinking about it, they get the level perspective. Now, there's a lot of people, you'll hear this on LinkedIn, you'll see this on LinkedIn, and they'll say, level 4 isn't better than level 3, because no, that's nonsense. Can you tell me any system on the planet where having more choice is worse than not having any choice at all? Unless it's the pick and mix, obviously, at Woolworths. But this is the point, isn't it? There's
a reason why Woolworths doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I know, right? Too many people picking and mixing. But this is it. So, of course, someone at level 4 in keeping system has more choice in how they respond. That's always better. So if somebody says that the levels aren't useful because they're not thinking it through properly, they're just trying to be politically correct. So from an organisational perspective, I will walk a manager or a C-suite team through the problem at the different levels, and they get it. Now, your point was, can I disrupt them in a moment? We don't grow in the status quo.
Yeah.
We really only grow through disruption. I will be disrupting their thinking most of the way through. Once I've shown them a level 4 approach, they get it, and they'll seek it out afterwards, and they'll email me and say, Darren, what's this about? And so on and so forth. But yes, once you've shown them a different level of thinking, they're keen for it.
We touched on something that was completely accidental just a moment ago, just as a joke. But it's very real. You've got companies like Woolworths, Blockbuster, companies that were highly established, probably created by a thinker who thought outside the norm. But by the time that company grows and there's so many people running the company, what I'm seeing is maybe a pattern that you might see in terms of the level of thinking. That they see disruptors coming into the market, and maybe through fear, I don't know, you'll know this way better than I do, but what is the reason that they are going out of business? It has to be something to do with their level of thinking. Surely it has to be. Is.
So you might have some risk aversion. So if you think about it from a cognitive intention perspective, you've got towards and away from, which is how we measure your risk aversion. Blockbuster is a great example because Netflix offered them the Netflix idea, right? And their C-suite said, no, it will never work. It will never work. People want to go somewhere and hire a physical tape or DVD. Now, it will never work. So Netflix said, we'll do it ourselves. And they offered the service of sending it. But what did they do? They trusted the customer to send the disc back. Right? Their risk aversion was way, way lower than Blockbusters, who were not willing to take a chance on the customer. So in a similar vein, I was delivering something down in London for NHS, and a manager came up to me and he said, Darren, I'm not very good at delegating. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I need some help. I need to be able to delegate more. I said, well, tell me, it's not about delegation. I said, tell me, the people that you're delegating to, do you trust them? Oh, no, they're idiots. Right? So I said, it's about trust. I said, and the principle is, if they can do it 80% as good as you, you delegate it. But it's about trust. You have to trust them. He's like, bloody hell, I never thought of that. So the ideas behind how we respond and behave, and not necessarily the reasons why we respond and behave. The profile system does that. Behind Blockbusters, it will be, we've always done it this way, which is level 2 thinking. Yeah?
Okay.
That kind of idea.
Interesting. I mean, because Greg and I surveyed, we had a survey sent out via our various networks to over 60,000 entrepreneurs in 2016. I don't know if you know about this, but so we sent that out we were shocked because over 41,000 of them responded to tell us what is their holdback, what is setting them back, why are they not going to the next level. And it took us over 6.5 years to distill that research because we didn't have something like what you've built, right?
Yeah.
And so like it took us all that time, and we published our first book together last year based on the results. We ran a 1-year experiment, and it was really fun. But what I'm hearing you talk about is kind of it's almost the same thing but from a different level, because what makes me really curious about how people make decisions, we're looking at it from a place of fear. How is it that we have supported and trained over 70,000 entrepreneurs in the last 10 years, yet only a very tiny percentage of them actually go and do something with it? And
So
there's so much fear that's stopping them from making decisions that could grow them.
What's the difference that makes a difference? So if first of all, give me the data, I'll stick it through SPSS, and we'll write a paper on it and get it published, right? First of all. Second of all, let's use the question lab to create a questionnaire that determines their level. Of risk aversion. Yeah. That says, okay, this is the data we got last time. This time, specifically, how are you thinking about your businesses? And that would be a fantastic book. But that is publishable, and that is fantastic data.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we published the book last year. In
a research journal. So with my university, we would have access to organisational paper, research journals, that kind of thing. Now, that'd be really good, because that gets your names in it.
We never think about things like that, do we? It was just like, okay, so how is this making that impact? Because that is ultimately the realistic element of the result of doing something like this, is what is the impact. And if somebody doesn't care about impact, and they're at what I'm hearing you say is like a level 2, I've got this, I'm already good, don't tell me anything, I don't need to know, I'm brilliant, I'm genius, I like, don't even bother me with this. And they're the kind of blockbusters that are going out of business. What we're curious about is, well, what is it that causes someone to fail? And it has to be to do with thinking, surely.
Definitely.
There will be other factors, but thinking is what created Disney World.
I can give you an idea. I worked with a client, and he said to me, I profiled him, and he came out quite low, and he said, Darren, I disprove your theory. I'm like, that's brilliant. Tell me how you do that. And he says, well, I'm a low-level thinker, but I make lots of money because I've got 4 businesses. I said, that's not quite right. Let me tell you specifically what you do. You had one business, and you followed a process, and that process made you money in that business.
Yeah.
Then you acquired another business, just by chance, and you transposed that process onto the new business, and it started to make you money. So by the time you got to your 4th business, you're doing exactly the same thing in all 4 businesses.
Yeah.
But what it doesn't tell you is which one is failing.
Yeah.
Because you've got cash in your pocket, and you don't see, you're not mapping this stuff together. You're looking at it from a very simplistic procedural perspective. You're not looking at it from a global abstract perspective. So when we did that and we mapped it all out on my whiteboard in my office, we got to the point. One of them was losing money, and he didn't notice it. So when you say these, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because and often I'm thinking, because I know quite a few people that are a level 2 thinker based on what you've said.
Always the way.
and just as I reflect on their behaviour and how they grow and don't grow, it's really interesting because they are so focused on the positive. They're not necessarily looking at where they're hemorrhaging.
Right.
And that can be from a business to, it could be a startup business even.
Exactly. So do you remember I said earlier about the difference between internal and external?
Yeah.
It's not the fact that they're massively internal that's the problem, it's the fact that they're not capable of external.
Yeah.
So the difference between the 2 scores is the problem, not that they're external. What they don't have, and this is what, so from a next level coaching perspective, the one thing that the coach in my system offers is they have a balance on internal, external. So they can offer an internal perspective where the other person doesn't have it, or an external perspective where the other person doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So one of my clients did not have an external perspective. He only had an internal procedures, my way or the highway. We're doing it my way because it always works, right? But it doesn't. He wasn't able to do that bit, and that is the coach's superpower in my system, that they can see both sides of the thing.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued. What is the vision for this? Like, where is this going? How many millions of impacts do you see yourself making through this work that you've literally dedicated your life to?
I will tell everybody about it. So I teach at university as well, and everybody at university knows about it. However, I've got an institute. So the Institute for Adult Development, people around the world are using it. My research is in about 6 or 7 languages, and they're all using the framework for developing other people. I think that I've got this thing called Destination 7, where you've got levels of my development, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right?
Yeah.
I think everybody can get up a level. And I've called it Destination 7 because I think most people can get to 7. And it's that idea. Think about it, right? Education is key.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's not about tacit knowledge. It's not about, even though I work at university, it's not about knowing what Dave Ulrich said about HR in 1998. It's actually about your capacity to think around the problem.
Yeah.
So businesses talk to me about they want more capable thinkers. That's my vision. With more capable thinkers, it will change our politics, for example.
Yeah.
We won't have a left and a right. There's no such thing as left and right. They're all the same.
Right.
You know? So it's making people aware. Sometimes it's called critical thinking, but for me it's cognitive complexity. The more complex you're thinking, the more choices you have. That's it. The more self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, 'cause I love playing in vision. That's my sandbox. Is okay. So where does this have the potential to go? And because you've dedicated your life to this, and you're now starting to work with people around the world. Your work is translated into different languages. It has the potential to grow and go anywhere. Paint the picture for those watching here. Like, what is the you know how IKEA, they say we're going to have a piece of furniture in every home around the world. What does your vision look like? How can we as an audience support you to achieve that vision? Paint it for us.
I've paused on purpose to let it, in case we need to edit it. I've done videos before. I'll pause again and then I can edit them together. So that's a really good question. For me, it's really about growing their thinking. I don't know how to say it anymore. It's just about, because you can't, the misconception is that we can train development. You can't. You always need someone who's at a higher level to point out the pattern you're not seeing yourself, right? So for me, it's about pointing out people's patterns to show that there's a level above where they are, including me, including everybody. Yeah. You know, and I still get stuck in some contexts. That's the other thing as well. It's definitely environmental. It's definitely context specific. So I could be AQ 8 in one context and AQ 5 in another context. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So I want people to understand that environment is key. You know, if you break your leg, a broken leg is an environment. If you get divorced, it's emotional trauma. It's an environment. Yeah. It's recognizing that how aware you are of your construction of you in the moment is key. Can you choose not to? Can you choose to construct yourself differently? That's what I want for everybody. Yeah. I
mean, it's interesting, like you mentioned about, I can't remember what was you mentioned, but it had my brain leapfrog to, I wonder what our MPs' level of thinking is. Like, you know, are they at a level 2? And that could be like, you know, my mission is to get people in a leadership role, no matter what level of thinking they are. I want, you know, my goal is to get everybody in a leadership level to like a level 7. So, because our world would change, the communities would change, our economy would change, the way we treat each other would change. The question is, do they want that change enough? You just are they happy the way they are?
You just said my goal better than I did. Right?
Had a feeling it might be there.
So on that very note, I heard a lady talking on Radio 4 the other week, and I've forgotten which party. I think she was the Green Party, and her thinking was up here compared to the other MPs. So I emailed her and said, "Can I profile you?" She said, "Thank you for that. No, right? But I appreciate why. At the higher levels, people will say no,
right? And
that's fine." But the idea is exactly that. So now, on that note, I've created my own political party. Right?
If anyone can, you can.
because what's a good decision? A good decision is a good decision regardless of the left and right nonsense. Right? So yes, you're absolutely right. So, and I also teach at university. We teach leadership, but we teach leadership in the same mundane way that every other university. So what I do is I bring out a slide I've got, and you'll see this on YouTube, in other videos. If you are AQ5, you can't do transformational leadership. Full stop, end of story. No one teaches that. You have to be AQ8 at least to be capable of transformational leadership.
Right.
But no one thinks of it in these terms. So I've got a slide on that, that kind of. So yes, you're absolutely right. Leadership, regardless of the context, higher level leaders is key. But conversely, thinking about it, people's capacity to do that leadership, if they can't do it, get rid of them. And that's the bit that people struggle with. Yeah.
So actually, as like an emerging leader, somebody that is maybe between, I'm thinking back to, we built 10 companies, so thinking back to one of our companies in particular, when there were just the two of us in the business, we were responsible for everything. You get that third person, it changes the dynamic completely. Yeah. And then the fourth person, now they're starting to work together and you're working together, and it's almost like this little subdivision comes in. And when we hit 5 in the business, that's where we started to notice that, okay, there's different levels of thinking here. I mean, I'm just looking back on that in hindsight. There's different levels. We brought in a coach to do disc profiling with us,
I hate that kind
so
of stuff.
that we could understand, well, how is it that we need to work together? And I think a lot of companies are thinking that is the way forward. So instead of, the ISO, let's just not rubbish anybody's kind of profiling, but let's call it isometric testing, or profiling of people, right? The average profile. What is it that, you said, I hate that kind of testing. What is it you hate about it, and why should we be using something different?
Because they don't tell you the levels. They don't tell you the level of self-awareness. If somebody's low level and they just bulldoze their way through meetings, what is it about their thinking that's limiting everybody else in the room?
Right.
You've got what Lasky calls a downwardly divided team. So for me, it's exposing their thinking that's key. I don't want a leadership team that's divided by people who are not capable of recognizing their own thinking styles, right? Mm-hmm. Because once you start to become aware of how you think, you become aware of how other people think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of person, then now we're starting to move towards a transformational idea. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas otherwise you've got an autocratic leadership style, which doesn't do anybody any favors. Unless, of course, it's an industry where you must have autocratic leadership, depending on the context again. Okay. Yeah. So
it's just so interesting, isn't it? Because we're living in a world now, and especially as we've travelled around the world launching our businesses, you notice that certain countries have certain types of thinking as well. For example, when we launched in Johannesburg and Cape Town in 2018, and we noticed that they were progressively more creative thinkers, and it was like they were like, just in the few months that we were going out there to launch, we noticed even like their level of thinking could change so quickly. Like they're so creative, like really changing quickly. And yet you go to somewhere like the Netherlands, and they seem to have I'm not the expert, you are, but they seem to have a very fixed way of thinking that seems much more challenging to have them thinking another way. That we had the same experience in Calgary versus 5 hours up the road. Very different thinking, and it's really interesting how the cultures of different countries have that challenge. I know you're working with all these different countries, so how are you working with that cross-culturally, or is it like it literally doesn't matter? You can take someone from there, no matter where they've come from, no matter what their background, you can take someone from there to there.
So interesting. This is where Greg's going to tell me off, because it becomes academic. There's this thing called the...
Let's play Pictionary.
So, okay. There's this thing called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, where language creates the culture. In using the identity compass, if someone is bicultural, somebody who thinks they are both German and Spanish, if they do the profile in German, and then a little while later they do the profile in Spanish, same questions, you get a different construction of self.
Wow.
Right? Because the culture and the language impact how they think and how they construct themselves. So this one person I'm thinking of, in German, his profile, and I'm going to use an obvious stereotype, much more refined, procedural, efficient.
Yes.
However, in Spanish, much more relaxed about time.
wow, so is that an identity thing then?
Absolutely.
So this comes down to identity. So literally you could be someone that is racked with fear, that won't get up onto a stage to share their
And
message.
they stutter.
Stuttering and...
In their own language.
Right, and then if you were to I mean, this just makes so much sense. Like, I was reading something yesterday, whenever he went in, it was Bruce Willis. I was reading an interview with one of his daughters, and they said he had a stutter when he was a child, but what he realised was when he was acting like someone else, the stutter went away, which is how he went into acting.
That's exactly it. So what you've also got is somebody who stutters in English will speak French fluently with no stutter.
I mean, that's just... It makes total sense.
It's your brain.
Yeah.
It's your brain. So, and there's a guy called Hofstadter who looks at cultural differences. So you've got something called high context cultures and low context cultures. So Japan, for example, they have this thing called reading the air. So you don't need to speak, and they know what they're thinking because the culture is 5,000 years old. You know, whereas America is the opposite.
Right.
You have to pay attention. You can't have, you have to have a contract. You can't just do a handshake. You know, and get things. So you've got these. So my profile system absolutely ties into those kinds of ideas.
Yeah.
So somebody who's Japanese and American, you'll have very different profiles for each, even though it's the same person. And if that isn't proof enough that how we construct our thinking is key, you know, what apart from my PhD, obviously, what other evidence do we need?
Yeah.
You know?
I would love to know, because we have how Greg and I started working together was I've got so many members that have gone through our entrepreneurial process to build a brand and launch it, and so many of them that have created everything and they've got it all perfect, but then it needs to be more perfect before they launch it, and they've decided now they're going to go in this different direction.
So they're options oriented.
And then it always keeps changing because they never get to that point of launch. And what I'm intrigued at is, let's take that one person and break them out into two people as such. This is the one who is racked with fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. What if all the people that I love go and abandon me when they find out that my idea is really good, or I start making lots of money and then people don't want to know me anymore because now I'm so different, versus the person who doesn't care about any of that stuff.
I work with people like that, and what they do, this is true. Yeah. What they do is they say it's predominantly level 4 people, so people who are self-authored already. They stop talking to friends and family who are low level because it's always a battle. It's always them trying to justify themselves. It's always, oh, you think you're so clever.
Yeah.
So they just say, you know what? I've had enough. And normally that is an outcome of my development process with them.
Yeah. Why?
Because it's the easiest option. It's just the safest option to step back and say, I don't need this negativity. It's pointless now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they absolutely do that. So from a business-oriented entrepreneur perspective, I absolutely agree that there'll be people who are not doing it because they don't want to be perceived as I'm better than you. Right. But it's not their perception.
We have a lot of members that have that issue.
So think about it in this way, right? This is your client who's thinking at this level. These are the people who are the naysayers. And what they do is they look and observe the patterns of this person and filter them through their lower level lens. Yeah. And they get it wrong every time. It's one of the reasons why I think if you can embed an internal locus of evaluation on people who require therapy, they no longer worry about what other people think and no longer need therapy because they get their rules for themselves. And I've got some stuff on this. I flipped my system around to create a therapy model. And it's being tested right now in Switzerland and in Hungary, I think. And I've got next year it will come back. So it's exactly that. The entrepreneurs need to stop worrying about what other people think about them because they're not filtering it through a lens that's useful. It's from a lower level lens.
Yeah. I have a friend who he was speaking on stage. Where was that? It was in Dallas maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he said, I've got this filtering system. He said, I've got like a 1, 2, 3 out of the importance of the things that are really important to me in my life, like my faith, my family, and my work. And he said because he started to get more of a high profile, one of the things he was concerned about at the beginning was, what will other people think of me? What happens if I start speaking and people start heckling me or whatever? And he had all these kind of irrational things that he didn't have any evidence of.
Can I just say before you think, it's not irrational, because if his faith is really important, that's a level 3 socialized mind.
Yeah.
So of course he's going to be worried about what other people think, because of his socialized level 3 mind.
Right. So it
ties in.
Yeah. I suppose it's kind of like the fear part of it that's irrational, and so he's built up these things, and then he starts speaking, and he said, I was really worried about what people would say on Twitter and whatnot, and all the comments and things. That's what he was really nervous about. But then when he started running it through these filters, like, okay, is this affecting this? Is it affecting this? Is it affecting this? Then it's not getting my attention. And I thought how just for somebody who is racked with fear of what other people are going to say, does it affect that? No. All right, it's not getting my attention.
That's exactly what he's done. He's run it through his internal system first.
It must be that like internal
so he's moving
driver.
Away. Now you'll find that in about 6 months, a year's time, he's going to move away from level 3 towards level 4. That's the point.
Yeah.
Much more self-authored.
And what is that? Is that exposure therapy? It's like you just get so used to it that thinking that way that you don't ever think like that, or you just literally neurologically you've changed.
Yes, because your brain, how you think, your brain takes the path of least resistance, and if you're automatically level 3, your brain takes a level 3 path through the synaptic processes, right?
Yeah.
Which is why it takes 1 month or 3, depending on how old you are, to change your patterns, because you literally have to create new brain pathways. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah.
So the point being there is, if you take the same path every time, and then you start, hang on, I can do this one. Over time, you've got a choice.
Yeah.
And that's all it boils down to.
Yeah,
Remember I said earlier,
yeah.
It's about choice.
Yeah.
Well, you have to, the pendulum has to swing the other way before it can come back to choice. So your man has been here forever, he's going here, and eventually, next year, he'll be saying, today I'm going to take on board that perspective. Today I'm not.
Yeah.
And that's it. Can you choose not to?
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. So what that comes down to is, what I'm hearing is, you can choose to have fear or not.
Yeah. What is fear? It's an away from perspective. So it's risk aversion. But if you're capable of noticing the obstacles in your way, and then you can choose to navigate around them, that's completely different to being complete towards. So if you do some kind of NLP training, you're always taught to be towards thinking, right?
Yeah.
But you're not looking at the problems in your way. If you can see the problems and choose how to go around them, that is key. Mm-hmm. That's what people don't do that. And the other thing is as well, we assume we're self-aware when really not. All the studies show we're not aware.
Yeah. All
the studies, including mine, I'm afraid.
Well, how does somebody get involved in your study? Like, how do they?
Well, obviously they can go through the IAD website, which is Adult Development Institute, and they can get in touch with me there. But if they want to come on to an MCO6, so we don't call them coaches, we call them more complex others, because you always need somebody who's that little bit higher than you to point out your patterns.
Yeah.
So we have a number of courses, MCO6, which maps into level 6 thinking, 7 and 8. No one will ever do my level 9 program, but it's there if somebody should want to do it, right?
Yeah.
Get in touch if you want to learn how to develop your thinking, how to move from an external perspective to an internal perspective, plus the other 48 cognitive intentions. Then give us a shout and we'll do it. Because we run workshops throughout the year. We run them on the university campus in Northampton. They're always there.
Awesome. You heard it here. So we'll put all the information in the link below. Get yourself booked on to the next course.
Thank you very much.